A bruised corpse. Let's go to the Kishimogen tunnel on our next day off. Akito started, and Yuto's expression clouded over. B's expression clouded. Anything but there. Yuto, who is usually enthusiastic about visiting horror spots, was unusually reluctant. Me, Akito, and Yuto, who are my colleagues in the company, had decided to go to a famous place related to spirits during our upcoming vacation. The Kishimogen Tunnel is a new place of interest that we have recently heard rumors about here and there. I do not know the official name of the tunnel, but there is a temple nearby that enshrines a deity called Kishimogen, which is also said to be the name of the tunnel. The tunnel is located halfway up the mountain, and since the completion of a metropolitan road at the foot of the mountain, it has fallen into disuse, and the mountain itself is now off-limits to visitors. Why should we not? I asked, looking at Yuto's anxious face. People are really dying over there. About 2 months ago, 3 students from a nearby university went there to try out their courage, but only one of them came back. According to the guy, the other 2 went into the tunnel and suddenly ran to the end of the exit. 3 days later, they still hadn't come home, and when the police searched for them, they found them dead in the tunnel. They had bruises all over their bodies. That's just a common rumor, right? Akito didn't seem to believe it. One of the survivors is a friend of mine who lives right next door to my house. I heard this directly from him. Both Akito and I fell silent for a while. As if trying to drown out the heavy atmosphere, Akito raised his voice and said, "You're saying those 2 were killed by ghosts? That's absurd. They must have gotten into a fight or were killed by someone else. If we blame the ghosts for every single murder, all the murders in Japan will go cold." I agreed with Akito. How many thousands of human-caused incidents occur in Japan every day? It would be natural to assume that they happened to be in haunted places. "Alright, I'll go with you then," Yuto replied with a downcast look on his face. With growing anticipation, Akito and I talked about the schedule for the day, but Yuto's expression never cleared up. The weather that day was nice, cool and pleasant for August. Once the members gathered at my house, we took a 2-hour train ride to a station in the suburbs. From there, we walked along a city road for another 2 hours until we reached the foot of the mountain where the Kishimogen tunnel was located. The mountain was surrounded by a fence, but the gate to the fence was unlocked, so we were able to enter easily. After about 20 minutes of walking up the mountain road between beech trees, we arrived at what appeared to be the Kishimogen tunnel. It was still around noon. At first glance, the tunnel looked unremarkable, a little dirty, and had no special features. It was a concrete tunnel that could be found anywhere. The light from the exit of the tunnel was shining through to us. The total length of the tunnel seems to be shorter than expected. Why is such an ordinary tunnel a haunted place? Akito said, sounding disappointed. We still want to go inside the tunnel. Yuto still couldn't make up his mind. If you're scared, you can stay behind. We'll go in together. Akito laughed and showed his composure. The 3 of us decided to go into the tunnel. The tunnel was very quiet. It was probably wide enough for 4 cars to pass through. We had brought a flashlight, but we did not need it in this tunnel. The light coming from both the entrance and the exit was enough to see my feet. There were puddles of water in places. The sides and top were clean for not having been used for many years. Not a single graffiti. This is a disappointment, Akito said, looking deeply disappointed. I thought I walked slowly, but it still took me a couple of minutes to get to the exit. Outside the exit, a fairly large area was level and overgrown with short plants all around. The paved road was cut off to the exit of the tunnel, and it would be a struggle to go any further. Immediately to the right, one can see a 2-story house standing alone. The front door has been removed and there are no windows. The entire exterior of the house was painted white, the kind of house you often see in the city. Hey, Look at that. Akito murmured, pointing at something. It is probably about 200 meters away, far beyond where the vegetation is growing. I see swings and slides. Is there a park? I asked, squinting, and Akito's voice became slightly stronger. No, that's a person. There is someone there. I squinted, and sure enough, I saw a human being in the sandbox area. A woman in a blue one-piece dress was sitting on the edge of the sandbox with her body facing me. I could not see her face very well. Hey, can we go home? Yu's voice was a little shaky. You mean there's someone living here? Akito turned his gaze toward the private house. Right after that, Akito's movement suddenly stopped. His face was stiff. I looked at Akito's eyes and my body froze. There was a person standing on the roof of the house. The sunlight was backlit and we could not see the figure clearly, but there was no doubt that it was a person. In front of the three of us who could do nothing but stare at the scene, the figure started to put its arms around itself. Rather than rotating its arms, it seemed to be moving only its shoulders with all its strength, and its upper arms, forearms, and wrists seemed to be just swinging around by the force of its shoulders like a decoration. In contrast to the violent movements of their upper bodies, their feet wobbled to the right and to the left, as if they were about to fall off the roof. None of the three of us could speak. Unable to escape, we could only stand there and watch the scene. At that moment, I heard a woman screaming "Ga" somewhere. It was quite close. For a moment, I remembered the woman from earlier and turned my eyes only toward the park, but she was sitting facing me, looking the same. I felt as if I was being shown the same picture of the park scene I had seen earlier. Then I heard another voice nearby. This time, it sounded like, "Ouch. It hurts." I heard. Yuto was shaking so badly that he almost fell off his back. Akito was also unable to move with his mouth open. When I turned my attention back to the roof, the movement of the shadowy arm became even more violent. He was swinging his arms all over the place, up and down, left and right, as if he was going to keep doing so until his wrists were torn off. Finally, he spun his whole arm like a windmill at great speed, and the figure flew off the roof as if pulled by his momentum. With a dull thud, the figure flew off the roof. With a dull thud, the figure fell a few meters ahead of us. A woman in her 40s or so was lying on the ground, bleeding from the mouth. Anyone looking at her face would have known that she had died instantly. However, her arm was still wriggling in a circular motion. Her arms were covered with bruises. Her face was full of anguish, as if she had despaired of everything in the world. I wanted to turn my eyes away from the scene, so I looked again toward the park. The woman was just looking at me. I thought something was wrong. No one would live in such an abandoned house deep in the mountains. First of all, even from there, I should have been able to see everything that had just happened. So why? After thinking about it, I suddenly realized that the scream I heard earlier must have been from the woman in front of me. I thought that the lady must have fallen off the roof because her body moved regardless of her will. If so, what is he? I'm afraid. A different kind of fear started to take over my head. I had to get out of here anyway. I whispered to Akito and Yuto, "Let's get out of here." They nodded. Now. At my signal, the three of us turned around at the same time and ran down the tunnel. Minutes felt like hours. We didn't stop, even though our hearts felt like they were about to burst. Just when I was starting to feel faint, we made it back to the fence at the entrance to the mountain. What the hell was that? Akito exclaimed, gasping for air. Relieved that all three of us were safe, I borrowed Yuto's cell phone and called the police. 2 days later, a morning TV program featured a series of mysterious deaths in a haunted tunnel. The story was featured on a morning TV program. It seemed that the police had removed the bodies and identified them. That lady was the mother of a college student who died in the tunnel 2 months ago. She had come to that place after praying at the nearby Kishimogen temple to make a memorial service for her child. The autopsy revealed that the bones in both of the aunt's arms were shattered and had marks where she had repeatedly hit something hard. However, what made the doctors most puzzled was that even the nerves in both arms had been shredded to shreds. Normally, no matter how strong the impact, it is impossible for nerves to be shredded to this extent. I felt a chill run down my spine as I imagined the woman screaming in extreme pain and banging her arms against the walls of her house. I was so curious that I called the temple that enshrines the Kishimogen and asked to speak to the head priest. Kishimogen is apparently a deity based on Indian folklore. Kishimogen had hundreds of children, but he had a violent temperament, snatching other people's children and eating them. In order to control him, Shakyamuni hid his youngest child, whom Kishimogen loved the most. Kishimogen realized his mistake and changed his mind under Shakyamuni. After that, she became widely adored by the public as the god of safe childbirth and child rearing. I boldly told the priest the whole story of what we had seen. The chief priest said that the tunnel is located on a straight extension from the entrance to the main hall where Kishimogen is enshrined, and that it could easily become a pathway. Since Kishimogen is a deity that prays for easy childbirth, it may have a particular influence on parents and women who have children. Come to think of it, the two college students who died were both women. If Kishimogen, which is supposed to be the object of people's faith, is having a negative influence on people in that place, what could have caused it? The priest said he did not know, but finally he said, "Actually, my wife suddenly started suffering 6 months ago and died in a flash. I don't like to think about it, but maybe something similar or different has entered the main hall of our Kishimogen shrine." He mumbled in a voice that sounded exhausted. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.